insulated. It's great. It's not right on the water, which when you're right on the water, sometimes that can get wearing, even though you
Yeah.
like surf, the surf moves around, the wind moves around, everything.
Things rust
Once I
and
was up
rot.
in, yeah, once I was up in the farm, it was interesting because I still had sort of my executive assessment skills in place, but I was lacking base skills. So I took a design in permaculture design down here in Baja
Wow.
with some friends, with Andrew Jones and Gabrielle Howarth, who started Buena Fortuna. And I took a permaculture design course to just feel like I had more skills. And the principles of permaculture and everything just almost became like a real guiding force. We talked about faith a little, like the guiding commandments maybe of my life about how to assess things and how to make decisions. And the fire ended up being a blessing because it really motivated me into building a home
Wait, you got to back
on
up.
my own.
You got to back up. You just mentioned the fire.
Did I
I
not mention that?
No,
Oh,
well, we might have talked about it earlier before I pressed record, and I told you to stop because I wanted to. That sounded like something we should talk
mhm.
about. So, yeah, you had a
Yeah.
fire. Tell us about
So I
that.
go up to I get this 16-acre farm, and it's got some beautiful hay bale, palapa roofed main house and a prayer sanctuary and the kitchen area. It was built by a wonderful man named Jeff Klein, who used to lecture on conscious capitalism, something we were
Ah,
speaking
yeah.
to. And Jeff stewarded the house over to me, which was wonderful. So I had this wonderful property, and I decided to move up there and focus on health and homeschooling and mothering. And we had this incredible forest fire come through one day that happens in Palm Groves, burnt 70 hectares, and the last 7 were mine.
Oh man.
And it burned all my buildings to the ground.
Oh,
So it was kind of a big decision making moment, to say the least.
what
And
year was that?
gosh, it's about 6 years ago now.
Okay, all right.
So I flew up to REI in Phoenix, and I got a backpack of clothes for me and each of my kids and a great tent and a couple sleeping bags. And I moved back, and we moved in under the bamboo,
Oh, that's so awesome.
set up a camp kitchen. I'd already been studying about making clay ovens. So I read a bunch of books, and I just felt totally overwhelmed, but then very empowered by the reality that I had very little money at this point now, because I'd planned my life and kind of got down to how much was enough, to leave this company and be free to be a mom. And here I was like 600 grand short on housing. Um, and I didn't have very much money. I just had like a monthly budget. So I ended up rebuilding a cob house with about $20,000 and doing it by hand and with a few friends helping and working, and just slowly in little spurts, few months at a time. And went about building my home. And I'll tell you, very empowering. Taking the permaculture design course really helped me feel totally confident about homesteading, about farming. I mean, we were growing all of our own animals, even and harvesting at one point, goats, sheep, um, chickens. So the reason I did that, when the house burned down, it was pretty precarious. I was on the edge from maybe retiring, being sick, the money spent. And I just had to reflect back to when the last time was that I was really, really happy. And it was when I was 9 years old. When
Huh.
I used to build tree forts and run through the forest barefoot with my girlfriends. And that was when I was happy. And my kids were 7 and 8. So I figured we'd just go live in that happy zone. If I didn't make it out of the cancer, my kids would have happy memories. And if I did, we'd be good.
Right.
And I wouldn't have all that extra stress. So I just major downsized, simplified. That's why you saw me go off the chart. I quit kind of socializing in that world. I also did a radical financial change in my life in order to leave the company. I cut my salary like half and then half again in preparation, and just really learned about being self-sustainable. And it was kind of a game of not consuming and not buying things, but doing things, making things, just a real down to earth, tactical, real life. And it was a lifesaver. It was a life changer. So happy.
Back to living the way we were meant to live.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I just, it was phenomenal for me and my kids, and have no regrets at all.
Yeah, what a process to be able to go through to at an early 20 something start a business and grow it into being, I mean, a very successful big company. I mean, 100 employees is no small company, and to then go back to, I mean, more or less living off the earth.
Exactly.
What a great experience to be able to kind of reflect back on and see that journey. And it's interesting I think about this sometimes, the way that our brains work, the way we mature, the things that we think about at different stages in life. You kind of hit it perfectly, 20 to almost 40, when you've got the energy
You're
and the
kind of
desire.
trying to prove yourself to others a bit more in that time too.
Right.
There's drive for external acknowledgement,
Acceptance,
and then you turn the corner and you're all of a sudden you're realizing, hey, I'm a mess.
Yeah, and what other people think of me doesn't matter anyways.
Yeah, it doesn't matter anyways.
Yeah. So you rebuilt the house and the farm, and you're raising 2 kids, a son and a daughter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And now we're 6 or 7 years past that. I'm looking at the background in your video chat here, and that is definitely not a hay baled home in Santiago. You're in Canada.
Yeah.
Where are you in Canada?
I'm in the Okanagan area in Penticton, British Columbia.
Okay. All right. So
it's a wine. It's like Napa Valley of Canada.
Okay, cool.
This
Very
area.
nice.
And my parents have lived here for 35 years. And a couple of years ago, my mother passed away. And when I came up for her service, my father said, hey, it sure would be nice if you and the kids moved up here. And my sister lives about 4 hours away from here in Vancouver, but very busy in her life. And he was up here by himself. So my kids and I just sort of looked at each other and we said, okay, Grandpa, that sounds good. And we made a flight reservation before we'd left from her funeral trip. I made a reservation to come back because I really wanted my dad to know that we were going to be here for him and he wasn't going to be alone. And it was like a Cupid across the room when he said, gosh, it sure would be nice if you moved home. It was so nice. And my kids were teens at the time and they responded like they were 3 and 4. They were like, oh, Grandpa, that's wonderful. Like they weren't going to leave their lifetime friendships behind or anything. And so we just quickly went about the task of getting as organized as we could, as quickly as we could. And we moved up a couple months later. I didn't give a lot of thought to it because my dad was my top priority. Yeah. And then secondly were my children and getting them set up in all their sports and activities. And so we moved up and got everybody settled. And about 8 months in, when it was freezing cold and very dark, it was a pretty depressing situation for me, to be honest. I got a tooth infection, something, you never get infections or sick in Mexico. So do you get, and I realized, I do, especially after being on the farm, I do live on sunshine. I live on fresh air, fresh water, fresh soil between my toes, fresh sunshine. And I really started looking at the reality of being here. And during my healing journey over those last 10 years, I had on my own body, I had chosen to do colon cleansing and deep tissue flushing to rid myself of past toxins and make sure I was clear. I was laden with all garden variety of goodies in there. So cleared my system up so knowing I wouldn't be in a cancer mode. And through that process, I learned a technique with a colons system that I think is just really valuable. And over the years in Mexico, as our small community goes, I always knew what was going on with people. So if people were having health issues, I would privately get up to them and just say, I'm doing this and it's really helped me. Would you like help? And I started doing holistic healing in Cabo the last 10 years, but just one-on-one, very individually, and getting more into my intuitive and my healing skills, which I've always had my whole life. Maybe my intuition is why Terramar was so successful, because I could sense things. So up here in Canada, looking at what to do, I decided to start a healing clinic. And I have a clinic up here called Biome, which is this identity. You're saying, what's this? I made a small company called Biome, and I focus on doing colon cleansing and helping people clear health issues and get back onto their optimum health journey. And I share that in Cabo when I go down now too.
I want to circle back to the cancer treatment, the healthy living and all of that. But this was, one of the topics that I did want to talk about with you, because I think we share this in common, and that's the culture shock. And you just alluded to it, of coming back to, for in your case, Canada, and for my case, it was California or the United States. But after living in a foreign country for a major part of my life and a major part of your life, that change from living in Mexico to living in the United States for me was a process. It was not an easy process. It was a depressing process.
Yeah, it is depressing.
And how do you describe? I mean, I've thought about it a lot. Like, what was so different? Why is it so different? And I can't pinpoint it. But what was part of it for you?
Well, I think the shock from having really pure food, water, air, sun, soil.
Sure.
There's a lot going on in the area I am. There's a lot of spraying and stuff going on. Nothing's really organic. I don't really feel like I have a clean place I can go walk on the soil, sort of, like everything here is kind of like a public park, so to speak.
Sure.
Lack of sunshine in the winter was huge. Just everything seemed so intense. And then the human factor also has been huge for me. And just the whole community, everything has felt like such a standoff. But I had kind of an interesting change in March about that, because I've been going back and forth and visiting Baja and keeping an eye on my things. And I definitely plan on moving back there in a few years. I just really realized that here I was feeling like I didn't fit in. And I just feel like an invisible fairy on the sidelines, kind of like I don't really feel like I'm even here. It's like this weird dimension where I'm an external, like I don't even feel like I resonate with the environment sometimes, which is odd. But I decided the last time I came back, I thought, I got this. You never ever say, well, I need to go find that community. You need to be community.
Yeah.
So the last time I came back, I thought, I'm going to quit trying to look for somebody like me. I'm just going to start being me. And I'm going to start sharing me and my trueness. Even people think I'm a weirdo, they'll go away. And if they are like me, they might stick around.
Sure.
And I just decided I'd act in community. And since I've done that, I've actually made some nice friends and acquaintances up here. But my mindset has just been to give service and be community to them, so to speak. And I'm very alive with my Baja community.
Oh, that's cool.
And do go back and forth on a regular basis. And I look for consulting opportunities and stuff on freelance basis, so I have reasons to go back. And I still plan on developing my properties down there too.
Yeah, it's
so I do plan on going back and forth. So now I'm starting to integrate. I'm inviting my Canadian acquaintances and people down to Baja now, and I'm integrating the two.
It's that straddling the border. That's
who I am.
Yeah, and that's kind of that's part of why I'm doing this podcast. I don't make it to Mexico. I mean, I do spend a lot of time there still, even with my day job, but I'm disconnected from it more than I want to be, I guess. And so the podcast is a cool thing for me. Gives me an excuse, to call up old friends or meet new people and talk about, in some ways, something that is a part of who I am, for sure. So that's I definitely can. Those your thoughts, they resonate with me. Let's put it that way. I want to go back to the cancer treatment and the healthy living stuff, because unfortunately, as I age, it's on my mind more often than it's not. Human health. And I've got quite a few friends that have either passed away from cancer here in the last few years or are dealing with it right now.
We're at that age, and our environment is really propagating it, especially in your area too. There's a lot going on in that area.
Well, and I've got a 5-year-old son that my wife and I made the conscious decision, which I'm assuming I think you'll be in agreement with, not to vaccinate him, which is an incredibly polarizing topic these days, especially here in California right now. There's some bills that are going through the House or the Senate in California. And
are you going to have to leave the United States or your state because you don't agree in obligatory imposition?
That remains to be seen. There are some other states that are not quite as controlling, if you will, as California. But I don't know. And I want to say I really do make a point to steer this